If you're a beginner stepping into a new language, French, Japanese, Swahili, doesn't matter, you probably feel this crushing immediate pressure,
Oh, yeah.
the pressure to speak right now, perfectly.
Instantly.
You feel like if you can't hold a sophisticated conversation on day one, you've somehow already failed. It's this performance anxiety. It's universal.
It really is.
And honestly, our sources confirm it's one of the biggest roadblocks standing between you and actually getting fluent.
It truly is. And that kind of relentless demand for instant output, it fundamentally misunderstands how our brains actually acquire language.
Right.
I mean, think about kids learning a second language. They often go through what linguists sometimes call a period of silence. They're just focusing purely on absorbing, listening.
Okay.
So our mission today really is to give you official, research-backed permission to embrace that phase, to just sit back, listen, and focus on building real competence through input before fluency is even expected.
That reframing feels essential. It's about accepting that speaking is the result, the eventual result, not the starting point.
Exactly.
So we're going to drill down into two core concepts that make this silent period, this input focus, really effective. And crucially, how it helps reduce that massive anxiety you feel.
Right.
First, the incredible power of comprehensible input, or CI. And second, the critical need to lower what's called the affective filter.
We really need to understand that language competence, it's built kind of below the surface. You simply cannot produce what you haven't yet absorbed.
Okay, so let's start with the fuel then,
Yeah.
the engine of acquisition. Comprehensible input. Can you define that for us? Why is it the primary driver?
Sure. Simply put, CI is understandable content. Could be reading, could be listening. That's just a little bit beyond your current comfort zone.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, challenging enough to force growth, but not so challenging that it just completely overwhelms you. Our sources often call this the I+1 level. Your current level plus one little step.
Okay, I+1. What does that actually look like in practice for someone learning on their own? Because that seems like a key insight for our audience.
It really is. It's finding that sweet spot. So let's say you know about maybe 1,000 words in your target language.
Okay.
I+1 material would be content, a story, maybe a news article, a short dialogue, where you already know maybe 80%, 90% of the words.
So you have context.
Exactly. You have enough context to follow the main idea, the plot, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But that missing 10% or 20%, that forces you to guess, to infer, to kind of expand your mental library.
Right.
And that active but low-stress inference, that's the growth mechanism right there.
And the sources really emphasize that effective acquisition requires massive exposure to this type of input. It's not just a little bit here and there.
No, volume matters.
Yeah.
And learning happens, through both deliberate study like flashcards, we'll get to that, and also incidental learning, just absorbing stuff from context.
But if you're leaning too heavily on crutches, you actually interrupt that natural acquisition process.
That's right. And we probably have to address the elephant in the room here, subtitles.
Yes, the subtitle debate.
Look, if you are trying to expand your ability to understand the spoken language, you really have to push past relying on them all the time.
Why is that? Because they feel helpful.
They do feel helpful, but think about it. When you watch a foreign film with subtitles in your own language, you're primarily learning with your eyes. You're leveraging your existing reading skills,
Okay.
which kind of bypasses the really vital process of training your ear and forcing your brain to make those new auditory connections. You're reading, not truly listening and processing the sounds.
I sometimes wonder, though, if for a true beginner, listening to raw content without subtitles just feels like noise. How do we make sure we're giving them meaningful input, not just, overwhelming static?
That's a really fair challenge. The key is choosing input that is already designed to be comprehensible. Well, things like graded readers, or maybe podcasts or videos specifically made for beginners that deliberately repeat high-frequency words and simple structures.
Gotcha.
If you just jump into raw native-level TV on day one, yeah, it's probably going to be noise. The goal is to find sources where you recognize enough of the structure and words that the unfamiliar parts stand out, rather than just drowning you.
That distinction is really key, and we actually have a phenomenal real-world anecdote that supports this whole input primacy idea. It's about an opera singer.
Oh, this is a great story.
Yeah, he needed to learn German, Italian, French, and Russian all at once, basically, for his career.
Which is a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
So this individual essentially turned language acquisition into this high-intensity research project on himself.
Right.
He used intense self-study, tinkering with different methods, including things like spaced repetition systems, SRS.
Which is basically like smart flashcards, right? The computer figures out when you need to see a word again.
Exactly. It schedules reviews right before you're likely to forget something. Super efficient.
But here's the crucial part, and this relates to what you said about building direct connections. He didn't just use SRS for vocabulary lists.
No.
He committed to this really specific rule. None of his flashcards had any English translations on them. None.
That's the fascinating mechanism. Instead of English, he'd use, say, pictures for concrete nouns, a picture of a dog for chiens in French.
Okay.
Or for abstract concepts or grammar rules, he'd use simple definitions in the target language itself.
So by cutting out the English, he wasn't building like a bridge between French and English in his head.
Precisely. He was building a direct neural connection between the French word chien and the actual concept of a dog.
He was building a new French room in his brain.
That's a great way to put it.
Yep.
Bypassing the need to constantly translate back to his native language.
So he committed to this input-heavy, no-translation system for months, mostly on his commute, like an hour a day on the subway, learned several thousand words, complex grammar in French. And here's the kicker, related to that period of silence. When he showed up for an entrance interview at an immersion program, they just wanted to make sure he hadn't cheated on the online test.
Right.
It was literally the first time he had ever tried to speak French in his life.
Think about that. All that input, zero output practice.
Yet, as the conversation went on with the interviewer, he was just stunned. He found he knew all the words the teacher was saying.
Yeah.
And he knew the words he needed to respond. He could think maybe haltingly at first, but functionally in French.
And the result.
They immediately bumped him into the advanced class.
That story is just perfect proof. Output speaking can emerge incredibly rapidly because that solid foundation of input-driven competence was already built.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to consciously sit there applying grammar rules like formulas.
Right, like conjugating verbs in your head.
Exactly. The goal is to speak automatically without even thinking about the rules. And that automaticity, it comes from massive exposure to comprehensible input.
Absolutely. It's like your competence is a reservoir.
Input fills the reservoir. Speaking is just opening the tap. If the reservoir is dry,
Nothing comes out. Simple as that.
that really drives home the idea that speaking is the result, not the starting point.
Yeah.
But, okay, we need to make sure the input we're getting is high quality, especially the sound.
Yes.
Because forcing speech too early, or maybe even just reading too much without hearing, can lead to what the sources call the broken word trap.
This is so critical, especially if you're learning a language that isn't spelled phonetically, like English or French, or one with sounds totally new to you.
What is a broken word?
It's a word you primarily learn through reading. So your brain files it away based on how it looks, its visual form.
Okay.
But because you haven't heard it enough, your brain hasn't created a corresponding, correct auditory file for it.
Ah, I see. So when you finally hear a native speaker say it correctly,
Your brain thinks, what's that? Never heard that before. It sounds like a completely new, unfamiliar word.
even though you know it from reading. Exactly. You end up with two separate files, a visual one and an auditory one for the same concept. It causes confusion, slows down your listening comprehension.
Which is why sound play or ear training is such a critical first step, maybe even before focusing heavily on vocabulary.
Absolutely critical. For many people, you literally cannot hear the distinction between certain sounds if they don't exist in your native language.
Like the classic example.
Yeah, Japanese speakers often struggle with the English R and all sounds, like in rock and lock. As far as their brain's initial wiring is concerned, those might as well be the same sound. They're fighting their own auditory processing unless they specifically train their ears first.
So practically speaking then, for beginners, what should they do? You mentioned ear training.
Well, leveraging tools like the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA, can be huge.
Okay, the IPA, explain that quickly.
It's basically a universal system where one symbol always equals one specific sound across all languages.
So it cuts through confusing spelling.
Totally. Learning the IPA for your target language saves enormous time in the long run because it tells you exactly how a word is supposed to sound, period.
What else?
And you should definitely use minimal pair testing.
Minimal pairs, like ship and sheep.
Exactly. Words that differ by only one single sound. Actively listening to those tiny differences, trying to distinguish them, literally trains your brain to create those new necessary auditory categories. You're basically rewiring your ear.
Makes sense. Okay, so you've trained your ear a bit. Now you're ready to move to full sentences, paragraphs.
Right, and here, reading along with an audiobook is described as excellent practice.
Why is that combination so good?
Well, the audio carries you along. It helps you pick up the natural rhythm, the intonation, the music of the spoken language, and it's massive comprehensible input, usually.
Okay, and this connects back to the subtitle point.
Yes, exactly. The sources really highlight that this reading along method is far superior for auditory skills than relying on on-screen subtitles.
Because subtitles train the eyes.
While the audiobook forces you to connect the visual recognition of the text with the actual auditory sound file in real time, you're building that solid unified connection we talked about, avoiding the broken word trap.
Okay, so we've established input is the essential fuel. You need lots of it needs to be comprehensible, and you need to train your ears. But what happens if the engine is seizing up because you're just too stressed out?
Ah, yes, the psychological barrier.
We need to talk about that.
This raises the second really important focus for today.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that high anxiety that's so common in beginners?
Right.
Our research stresses that the affective filter, which is essentially your emotional hurdle, significantly impacts second language acquisition.
How so?
When anxiety is high, that filter goes up like a shield, and it literally blocks the input from reaching the parts of your brain responsible for language acquisition. You might hear the language technically, but you can't process it effectively. You can't absorb it.
So lowering that filter is crucial.
We must lower it for acquisition to happen efficiently.
And there's direct evidence on this, isn't there? I remember reading about a study.
Yes, quite compelling evidence. One study found that when participants spent time collaborating with teachers and peers before doing a stressful writing task, they specifically noted that this collaborative sort of low-stakes interaction time lowered their anxiety and actually increased their motivation.
So that social support, the less demanding environment, it acted as a filter depressant.
Exactly. And we can apply this principle right away, whether you're in a classroom or learning on your own.
How?
Well, for instance, if you're tackling maybe an overwhelming textbook chapter, a teacher or you, the self-learner, could decide to highlight only the key concepts, the absolute core vocabulary, and maybe the summary statements for the first pass.
Pre-filtering it.
You got it. You're reducing the cognitive load, reducing the stress, while still getting the crucial information. It makes the input feel less threatening, more comprehensible.
I can see that. Although I wonder if some beginners might find it more stressful trying to figure out what not to read.
That's a valid point, and that's where ideally a teacher or a mentor guides you. Or if you're alone, you have to be really disciplined about sticking to graded, beginner-focused materials initially.
Okay. What about interaction? Lowering anxiety when you actually have to talk or listen to someone.
Yeah, the sources offer some powerful strategies there. For speaking practice, the key seems to be frequent opportunities for what they call oral rehearsal.
Oral rehearsal.
Yeah, basically low-pressure practice. Think small group discussions, working with a partner, or just practicing pronunciation drills with a language buddy where mistakes are not just expected, but maybe even encouraged as part of learning.
And my favorite practical strategy from the sources, especially if you're interacting with a teacher or maybe a patient native speaker, is about patience.
Oh, wait time. Yes, crucial.
Making sure you always give the learner or yourself, if you're the one trying to speak genuine, sufficient time to actually think and formulate a response.
Absolutely. That wait time respects the immense mental processing that's happening, especially when you're translating or constructing a sentence on the spot. Rushing someone just ramps up the anxiety.
Totally. And when mistakes inevitably happen, because they will.
Oh, they will. That's how we learn.
The sources strongly advise against sharp, immediate disruptive correction. The priority is keeping that effective filter low.
Maintain that safe space above all else.
Okay, so let's model that. Let's say a learner says, yesterday, I go to the store and buy a new shirt. What's the best low-pressure way for the listener, maybe the teacher or friend, to respond?
Right. First, you don't interrupt. You let them finish their thought.
Okay.
Then, you gently model the correct usage after they've finished speaking, usually just by incorporating it naturally into your response.
So you might say.
You might respond something like, you went to the store yesterday and you bought a new shirt. That's cool. Did you like it?
I see. So you provide the correct input, went, bought, for their ear to absorb, but you don't explicitly point out the error and make them feel bad.
Exactly. You reinforce the correct usage, incidentally.
Yeah.
You treat the mistake as just a normal part of the communication and learning process, which it is. It doesn't shatter their confidence.
That whole approach makes so much sense. It builds on everything we've discussed.
It really does. Whether the learning is deliberate like, systematically building flashcards for your spaced repetition system, or if it's incidental like just enjoying an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
It's the process of constantly building and connecting knowledge that matters. Every little bit you acquire, whether it's a word or a grammar pattern, it acts like a nail, as one source put it, a nail on which you can hang other words and forms later,
Layer by layer.
layer by layer. And shedding that impatience for instant, perfect speech is just crucial because acquisition is a layering process. It takes time.
Okay, let's bring this deep dive home then. Our mission today was really to give you, the learner, permission. Permission to step back from that intense pressure to perform instantly. The path to fluency, as the research shows, it's built on quiet, consistent, high-quality input. It often involves a necessary period of silence, of just absorbing. It's not built on instant, probably broken output.
Exactly. You have permission to focus on listening and reading first without feeling guilty about not speaking yet.
Remember that competence is the reservoir, and fluency is just the flow from that reservoir.
That's the core idea. If you focus on filling that reservoir through comprehensible I+1 input, and you actively work to minimize your anxiety by lowering your affective filter, the speaking will eventually take care of itself. It emerges.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Focus on what you actually need right now in the language. When you're starting out, you're going to need a functional phrase like, excuse me, or can you repeat that? Probably 1,000 times more often than some obscure noun like orangutan.
Uh, Probably true.
So if you focus your limited energy first on understanding the core high-frequency words and simple sentence patterns through input, what's the next essential functional phrase, one that keeps a conversation going, maybe buys you time? What phrase will you allow yourself to focus on and absorb next?